and I hope that everybody has managed to get a little bit of downtime over the last month. I think we've all still found it fairly busy, but I think that recess has just been very, very different, along with the last 4 months. So I hope that you did manage to get a little bit of downtime, and we are now back in session in the council. Welcome everybody to this morning's emergency executive. Do we have any apologies? Perhaps Councillor Nicholl, as he's running late.
Yeah, and just in case it doesn't come, I apologise, please. Okay,
thank you. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No. As ever, if there's any item appears on the agenda that someone realises they have a declaration to make, they can be done at any time. Just before we go into the meeting proper, I know that there will be people looking to ask questions, particularly around the SQA results. I think we have to say it's very positive that Falkirk has continued to show an improvement on previous years' progress, and that's down to the diligence of the teachers, the parents, and particularly the pupils through this difficult time. But we don't have all the information available, and Mr Naylor is in the process, as he always does at this time of year, of preparing a report that will come to members at the next emergency executive meeting. So I think it would be more appropriate if people could hold their questions and their thoughts and concerns until we actually have that information available to us. And at that point, members will get the opportunity to scrutinise the detail of that, and will be able to make sure that the information that is shared publicly is within context, rather than today perhaps picking on individual items that are within the public domain just now that may not be entirely accurate. So can I just ask Mr Naylor to confirm that you're in the process of preparing something to come forward?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Ordinarily, we would go to the Education, Children and Young People Board in September with our SQA results report. Given that we're on a different cycle, it's possible for us to bring that to the next emergency executive if members want that, or perhaps the one after that. But as the leader says, we have the high level results. We're currently going through them. As you know, the schools, although staff will have been in this week to be looking at the results, schools officially return as of Monday. So the school level analysis will begin in earnest next week, but certainly I'll bring a report to the next meeting of the emergency executive on the results.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr Naylor. We move into, excuse me, if we move into the meeting proper, we have item 3 is the minute of the emergency executive held on the 25th of June. Could I have agreement on that as an accurate record, and if there's anything that anybody wishes to raise? Agreed?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. We also move to the minute of the emergency executive held on the 7th of July, and similarly, as that content as a true record, and is there anything that anybody wishes to raise?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the update on the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Scheme, and this is going to be taken by Mr Gillespie. Kenny Gillespie.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides an update on the Council's involvement in the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. It provides information and seeks approval to continue participation in the new resettlement scheme, which will amalgamate 3 of the largest existing Home Office resettlement schemes. In section 3 of the report, it provides background since 2015, when 32 councils have actively participated in resettling over 3,000 refugees. Falkirk pledged to resettle 60 people over a 5-year period, and to date we have resettled 54, with the final family arriving once the COVID restrictions are lifted. Within Appendix A of the report, it highlights that the positive impact that the resettlement programme has had on individuals, their families, communities and their economy. However, the most compelling evidence of the positive impact the resettlement programme has is also within Appendix A, where Alam has bravely told in her own words her story and her thanks to the people of Falkirk. Carrying on through the report, on the 17th of June 2019, it was agreed Scotland would continue to be involved in resettlement of vulnerable refugees, which was endorsed by COSLA on 28th of June 2019, and has now started engaging with the local authorities. The three largest settlement schemes will be replaced by one global scheme, and this will bring consistency of provision for all refugees who are resettling in the UK. It is assumed that most areas in Scotland will continue to participate in the resettlement scheme. Based on Falkirk's previous pro rata pledge, this would equate to another 60 refugees for resettlement over the coming 5-year period. A 5-year budget plan is provided to Council by the Home Office for every individual that arrives under the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme, and it has been confirmed this will continue in year 1, which is 2020-21 of the new scheme. All additional support is funded by the Home Office as well. It's also for committee to be aware that in 2016 a temporary resettlement officer was recruited, and in 2017 a temporary resettlement worker was recruited to support the scheme. Both have fixed term contracts until 2022 and is funded by the Home Office. The majority of Scottish local authorities are committed to ongoing participation. It is recommended that Falkirk also continues to participate, subject to continued funding to further develop the service created since 2016 and help support and balance of the diverse community. I would therefore go back to section 2 of the report and ask the Executive to agree the recommendations laid out in 2.1 and 2.2. And Convener, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Gillespie, for that. Just to say that Scotland warmly welcomes refugees, and we're playing a critical role in ensuring that these displaced families have a new place to call home and a chance for a fresh start. We are dedicated to being a good global citizens and doing everything possible to make our world a better place. One way that we are working with our neighbours around the world is in helping with humanitarian crises. Scotland has a long history of welcoming refugees and asylum seekers who need a place of safety from all over the world. This is a warm and open hospitality, something which everyone can look forward to when they come to Scotland. Refugees have settled in Scotland and have become part of our communities. They are our work colleagues, our neighbours and our friends. Since 2015, Scotland has proudly received refugees under the United Kingdom's Syrian Resettlement Programme. From day one, Scotland made a commitment to receive a fair and proportionate share of the refugees under the UK's commitment to resettle. There was originally 20,000 refugees by 2020, and Falkirk has played a significant part, taking more than we originally had agreed to. Here, refugees are provided with support and somewhere safe to live, but perhaps something even more precious is a bit of hope for the future. The arrival of over 2,000 refugees in December 2017 ensured that we met that promise in just 2 years' time, 3 years ahead of schedule. As a result, we were able to increase our number to 3,000. This is an excellent example of our desire to help those who need it most. Local authorities across Scotland remain committed to supporting refugees, and Falkirk will continue to welcome refugees arriving under the Syrian Resettlement Programme. We've seen the progress for those who have arrived in 2015, and having integrated those most of whom have chosen to continue to live in Falkirk, integrated within our communities, creating depth and diversity to them. But most of all, they're safe and free to live their lives and start to recover from the horrendous and traumatic experiences that they've had. In a humanitarian society, it's the right thing to do, and I'm proud that Falkirk is able to offer that support and a home to them. And my thanks also have to go to Aslan for sharing her story, and I wish her and her family well for the future. I'm happy to move the report. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener, and I'd just like to echo every single word you said there. I hope all of us here do the exact same. If I can just touch on Alam's story there, and hopefully everybody has read it. I certainly read it just the other night, and it moved me certainly, and gave you an insight into what Alam and her family have went through. I'd personally like to thank her for this extremely touching account of her and her family's journey. She uses the word freedom, and hopefully she has found that and a safe home for her and her family. I'm more than happy to second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Bissett?
Any country that has oppression or a dictatorial regime, and people are fleeing the country, I think they deserve to be homed in a country that's welcoming, and certainly Scotland is very welcoming and has been over the years, as you rightly said. Certainly reading Alam's testimony, if you like, it was quite moving, and at the end she says it's just the beginning of her journey, and Falkirk has welcomed her into the area and their family, and I hope that the future is bright for them all. And as I say, there's a lot of conflict throughout the world, and it's our duty in a humanitarian society to do our for those who are oppressed, and warmly welcome them into our society and integrate them. And I'm sure there'll be more conflicts in the world, and we'll need to embrace whoever's trying to escape and live a better life. At this point, I would just like to offer my condolences to the people of the Lebanon who have had that tragic accident at the port, and they've certainly not had their sorrows to seek over the years. And I'd just like to acknowledge, put forward my condolences to these people who have lost their lives and their families. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think we all share your condolences, and our thoughts are with the families who have lost those in the Lebanon, indeed. Councillor Connolly, you wanted to come in?
Very briefly, I mean, I think to support the report, I mean, I think this is something that as a council and as a community we should be doing, and we are despite everything that's going on just now, we are so lucky. We don't have to live with the sort of conflict that so many across the world do. And I echo what Councillor Bissett has just said. I mean, I think that we have a role as a duty to support people, and duty to take refugees within this country and continue to support their resettlement. I think very briefly to say, to recognise the great work that the team have been doing to provide the support to families coming to this area, but also to the number of community organisations who are supporting families as well. But I think we can't fail to continue to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, Convener. Just like everybody else, thank Kenny for the report. As has been stated in previous meetings, at one stage of our lives, our families have been immigrants coming from other parts of the world, and they were made welcome. It is the right thing to do, and like Councillor Gardner, I read the story the other night there, and it was heart-wrenching, and we take it as granted, the freedoms that we've got, and hopefully we can support more families in the future. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Any other member? Councillor Neville?
Thanks, Convener. Can I just say that I share the comments that have been made so far. It's a very worthwhile cause, and we need to do what we can to try and help support these people. Can I just clarify the figures? It was initially 60. Are we adding another 60 to make a total of 120 now? Is that the case? And do we have any indication as to how much this is actually going to cost the Home Office? Thanks.
Kenny, can you more details?
Obviously, that would depend on the executive's and committee's agreement to the actions in section 2 of the report. But again, our pledge would be to take on the same percentage. I've also put within the report 2.2 as part of the commitment, as long as the funding's still coming from the Home Office. It's certainly been guaranteed for the first year. It roughly works in regards to over £20,000 a year, but there's additional support provided depending on the additional support the individual families need when they're here and when their resettlement is taking place. And that's usually, we're aware of that in the first 2 or 3 months, but it's fully supported by the Home Office.
Thanks, Kenny.
Councillor Alexander?
Yes, Convener, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Right, that's good. Yeah, I hear the point that Alan's making, but for me, the issue is not about the funding, because the funding is you know is welcome, and it shows a measure of commitment from the UK government, but it's not the first consideration. The first consideration we have to make is it the right thing to do? And clearly it is. These families have integrated particularly well in Falkirk, and anyone who's had the opportunity to talk to them, as I have, within the Falkirk North Ward, will know that the sincerity of the gratitude, will know also the background through stories that have been passed on from other members of the family who are still in, for example, in the country of birth. So it's the right thing to do. The funding, yeah, let's take every penny we can possibly get from any source that's legitimate, but that's not the message we want to send out. The message we want to send out is this is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I've got Councillor Coombs and Councillor McHugh. Councillor Coombs? And Councillor...
Originally, when I put my hand up, it was to say thanks to Kenny and his team because it hadn't been said, but I've obviously been usurped since then. And like Councillor Alexander, I have spent time with them. I was invited to share an evening meal at the home of one of the refugees in Falkirk, and they are indeed genuine people, and that was a very moving tribute. It's a pity we can't do more, but as I say, whatever we can do, we should continue to do. And I think to send back to Kenny's team our grateful thanks, and I'm sure the refugees do it as often possibly as well, but just to say that they are doing a great job and making a big difference. And I think that what this does highlight is the fact that it's not just the plight of the refugees across the world, and COVID is obviously making that a lot worse. Right-wing populists don't help, but I think it really does highlight the fact that what we need to be building here is gardens and not walls across many of the different aspects of political life.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coombs. Councillor McHugh, then Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Convener. There's been a lot said, and obviously we understand that our country has a very long history of welcoming and persecuted families from throughout the world, including our countries neighbouring us. I was moved to inconsolable tears when I read that letter, because it really hits home how much struggle we're struggling. There's a lot of families struggling in our country, but it's not even a drop in the ocean to what some families are having to struggle, and in particular often the mother of the families. So I feel it's a shame that obviously we have our percentage. The UK decides on how many refugees we can accept, and then we have that it's broken down obviously, and I just wish that, as Councillor Coombs says, we could do more. So this, you know, that we're doing is the right thing to do, and I just wish we could do more.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I think we're all kind of sharing that sentiment. Councillor Reid.
Yes, I'll be very brief, Convener. Just to give special mention to Falkirk Trinity Church, who have put in tremendous work with the Syrian refugees, including Alam and her family. I know you've been at many of the functions that have been held, and felt the warmth of feeling towards these people coming from a very highly civilized country and well educated, and then ending up with nothing. So thanks to everyone concerned.
Yeah, we should quite rightly acknowledge the additional support that comes from within the community groups, and Trinity Church Rainbow Ladies Muslim group and FOSS all coming together to support those and being able to assist them in integrating within to the Falkirk communities, but also be mindful of our communities and being able to help share some of the cultures that they've come from, and help them through some of the experiences that they've had, so that there's a better understanding within our communities. And I'm pleased to see that across the board that they have been welcomed, and there's not been any of the concerns that may have come, as Councillor Coombs kind of touched on, in relation to what could have happened. But we are a very tolerant society, and we're a very open society, very warm and welcoming, and that's been to our credit, and I think that is something that has been recognised by the refugees, and I wish Kenny and his team all the best in taking forward this work. And if there's anything that any of the elected members can do to support that, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to do that. Okay.
Agreed.
Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 5, which is the capital programme update report. And so, Mr. Snell, we see you in the flesh today, so we'll be able to see as well as hear what you're saying. Over to you.
Thank you, Convener. A double bonus, and good morning. Yes, the capital report. So what we have is something that very much mirrors the revenue report that you already received in June, insofar as there's an element of rear view mirror looking back at the financial year just closed, 1920, looking at the current year, and finally casting an eye forward to the future programme. And as always, of course, it covers both the general services and the HRA. This report's very much viewed, I think, as setting the scene rather than geared particularly to taking decisions today. I think members will have a more rounded picture in the planned suite of reports that are scheduled for Council in September, and we'll have a better context for taking actual decisions. So, starting with the financial year just past 1920, we've got the table at 311 for the General Services Capital Programme, summarises the position, and you can see in the table there the last line indicating the movement since we last reported in February of some 2 million. The subsequent table in 312 and the paras shortly thereafter provide further background in that. And insofar as the detail of the slippage goes, Appendix 2 lists everything making up the figure in the table of 0.6 slippage. So that's essentially the story for general services. Some movement since we last reported, but relatively not all that significant, bearing in mind it was picking up the initial impact of COVID kicking in. On the HRA, in the next section, section 3.3, overall, again, as you can see in the table at para 331 there's only a a very marginal movement since we reported in February. However, as is often the case, the position masks a range of compensating movements, and they're summarised in the following paragraph at 332. I'm just looking as I go through this to pluck out what I think are the particularly salient points rather than slavishly going through the detail of the report. So I'll be skipping over some sections. Just to touch on the prudential indicators at 3.5, these are a suite of indicators which are appended in Appendix 4, which we're obliged to produce. And obviously have so done. And 3.6, as you now recognise, we always incorporate in the capital report, and indeed in the sister Treasury report, the close linkage between the two. But the primary driver impacting on Treasury will, of course, be the extent of borrowing undertaken to finance the programme. So in section 4, we turn our attention to the current, and of course, this is where we're going to see the dramatic estimated impact of COVID. And of course, the new financial year, or the current financial year, necessarily captures the slippage position from 1920. So there's that strong linkage between the two financial years. In terms of the General Services Capital Programme, just to highlight an error in the figures quoted, which I've just only recently picked up. So the table at, where are we, para 412, and indeed the narrative in the following paragraph 413 talks about an impact of 20 million, actually, because DEAR, the impact of DEAR, 5 million's been missed from that. The true impact is 25 million, so apologies for that. But just to make clear, the 20 million quoted in these two paragraphs as an impact of COVID requiring a whole suite of projects, or at least a significant part of the spend on a whole suite of projects to be carried forward, projected to be carried forward to the next financial year, is not 20 million for general services, but in fact 25 million. Just drawing your attention to para 415 and just drawing a linkage with the February budget report, where the resources available weren't able to accommodate all the bids, and part of those that didn't make the cut related to mobile and flexible working, basically our ICT capacity. And just to make the point that clearly COVID has shown the importance of those elements to the effective functioning of the council. And the report, updated report, which I alluded to earlier in September, will give members an opportunity to review things in the round, and helping to inform that will be an updated digital strategy, which will go to that same meeting. A link point, I think, is relating to para 416, the following paragraph, just noting the decision taken at the February budget meeting to provisionally inject 7 million into roads, but looking for a report to set out the manner and way such a sum would be spent. So that will be forthcoming to the September meeting, and tying in with my earlier comments about members being able to see things in the round in the context of the radically different scenario that now prevails. On ARA, section 4.3, an even worse impact, albeit the size of the programme is substantially larger than the General Services Capital Programme. And you can see in the table at 431, the middle line there, impact of COVID, 45, nearer 46 million. So these are huge sums, 45 million here, 25 million in general services. Massive impact on the programme. The explanations for that, some of which will be self-evident, are set out in the bullets at para 432. You can see various elements explaining how things are as they are at the moment. So the headline story in that section is profound impact from COVID on both programmes with significant expenditure and necessarily having to be carried forward to the next financial year, 21-22. Section 5, we cast our eye forward to the future programme. And members will recall that one of the elements that does flow from the February budget meeting was the recognition that we didn't have the full grant picture across the 3 years. We got year one, i.e. the current year, but the subsequent years were to be advised in the summer. Hence, this review initially in this report, but perhaps more specifically in the report going to September Council, allows members an opportunity just to take stock on where we sit on capital as well as revenue, because clearly there's a close impact between the two. Given the impact on the national finances, it will come as no surprise, I'm sure, to anyone to be advised that there hasn't been an update on the capital grant position for the subsequent years. And I suspect that it will be very late in the budget process for both revenue and capital that we'll get the grant figures. As I say, given the parlous state of the national finances, Westminster, but of course flowing through to the Scottish Government as well. So there's a strong sense of uncertainty that pervades our position. And of course, many business organisations as well as other councils are in exactly the same position. And of course, looking forward and reappraising how things sit, we have the important work on the review and update of the Council's priorities, which once agreed will be key drivers as to how we allocate the resources that are available. If I could just draw your attention in or at paras 5.4 and 5.5, because they're related. 5.4 in the bullets there outlines a series of significant strategies that are underway, and inevitably, as they're fully worked up, we will see bids and impact coming through in the capital programme. And in terms of 5.5, just a reminder that there are quite a few significant projects that aren't yet captured in the capital programme, but as we roll the programme forward, we'll need to sit in the overall frame of bids relative to inevitably finite resources. So there'll be some difficult decisions inevitably in terms of how that circle gets squared. And the process for the capital programme, because of the uncertainty I mentioned earlier, has been held back a bit, not least until the priorities are firmed up. But we're, preparatory work is being undertaken and we're primed, ready to go, and to some degree we'll play catch up in the second half of the financial year as the programme progresses. And the report also in this section just makes clear the need for those work streams to come together with their capital impact so that the overall picture can be looked at in the round. So that's as much as I was proposing to say. If I can just jump back to the suite of recommendations at the front end of the report. 1 to 4 are clearly geared to noting the position in the various strands that I've run through, and just to pick up on the 5th recommendation there, the point I was making about this really being measure a report for information of members, just to update the position, but acting as something of a precursor for decisions in the September report. So I'll stop there, convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, for that. And I think it's helpful to get this report at this time, and to give time to digest what it tells us post-COVID. And also, I think we still need to pause before starting to restructure our capital programme and take into account the views that have come back as part of our vision and priorities, because if we agree priorities, then we have to be prepared to put resources behind those priorities, such as poverty, economic regeneration, health and welfare, and education. We need to be prepared to look at restructuring our resources in order to meet those priorities. Otherwise, we raise expectations of the public, and will not be able to deliver on those. I think it's going to take a bit of time to restructure our programme, and I hope that we will be in a position at the Council in September to be able to take something very positive forward and give a sense of hope, and use our capital programme to kickstart that recovery process going forward. I'm also very aware that we are still awaiting further information from governments around what the longer term funding may well be, and I appreciate that that's difficult for them to plan that right at this moment in time, but I would hope that over the next month we'll start to get a bit more information about their trajectory around their recovery programme, and to where resources are likely to be available to come to local government, to be delivered at a local level as well. So I'm not going to say too much more on the report, other than thank you for bringing this forward. I appreciate it's a work in progress, but as members we now to do a bit of work in progress too, and looking at how we can restructure our capital programme to make it work most effectively for the people who we represent. But I'm happy to open it up to questions at this time. Councillor Bissett.
Everybody else jumping in there, but I think it is basically setting the scene for what's to come in September, and I thank Brian and his team for pulling that together. It gives you a kind of basic understanding of where we are. I just wanted to ask Brian a question on this 25 million and 45 million revenue in HRA. That's what's that, 70 million. That's a lot to be carrying forward. Have services came back to you and said they just can't deliver this, or is there an opportunity to accelerate some of these programmes and understand, look at the restructuring and how this finance will fit in, and maybe some programmes need to come out? But I just wondered, is that the final word? Is it these can't deliver these services, or is there an opportunity, given that we're trying to boost the economy, is there an opportunity to try for services to maybe ramp up some of these programmes and possibly deliver them? And my other question was, it was basically a couple of questions. on the investment zone, 90 million is a lot of money. You know, it's comparable with other councils. I just wondered if that's affected the TIF money we were planning to get in. And also, there was a question some time ago about you could possibly use capital money for revenue, or it might change the financing rules. Did anything ever come about with that? That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Okay, so three points there. I'll maybe for the middle one in investment zone ask others who may be better equipped to address that if they will, but I'll deal with the other two first. So in terms of the scale of the slippage, as you say, the horrendously large figure of 70 million, that's been derived from close engagement with services and obviously supported by the technical input from development services. There is a view from my colleagues within finance that even that, given what's come back from services, might even be optimistic in terms of what we're able to achieve in the current year. So that figure could be worse, but clearly services will make every endeavour to optimise the programme, both in terms of delivering the inherent benefit of what the projects were there to do in the first place, but also very mindful of the linkage with the wider economic position and the benefits that would just simply flow from an injection of significant spend into the economy. So perhaps if this meeting were to send a strong message that services should review the current position, and of course it is an uncertain environment and it's constantly shifting, but as a general principle, a mandate from the executive, which of course would be relayed to all services, to make every endeavour to optimise what spend and investment is in practice capable of being made in the current financial year. So I would leave that with you as you see fit. On the third point, and it's a very important one in terms of the overall financial position that councils face, there have been a range of overtures under the collective term fiscal flexibilities that would, if approved, and that's the big if approved, would make a significant difference to the immediate decisions councils would have to take to address the current situation. So the bid has been formalised through COSLA into the Scottish Government and in turn through to Westminster, because some of what's been asked for isn't in the direct gift of Holyrood, it's determined by the Treasury in Westminster. And part of that suite, a big part of it, is the opportunity to either use capital to finance revenue spend, or a variation of the same theme, use capital grant that isn't currently going to be spent for the reasons we've just been talking about to be applied to revenue. These aren't the only requests that have been made, but they're important elements. It has to be said that, albeit absolute decisions haven't yet come back, they're in play. The how shall I put it, the mood music isn't particularly positive. That of course can change, but as things sit, it's not solutions that on the balance of probability are likely. So hopefully that gives you just what the latest position is. It's in play. We don't, and we can't rely on them, those answers when they come being positive. I don't know if my colleague, Director of Development Services, or perhaps the Chief Executive would be best placed to give some comments on the investment zone. Delegation upwards, I think it's called.
Well done, Brian. I think Kenneth might be able to make a few comments in relation to the investment zone, although I seem to have lost his video. Are you still there, Kenneth? No, he seems to have dropped out. No. Robert,
I can pick up the slack.
sorry?
Chair, I'm quite happy to pick up the issues with the development zone. Investment zone, sorry.
The investment zone. Okay, Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, if there's anyone wants to add anything in the meantime.
Councillor Bissett, there was a discussion yesterday with the group leaders in relation to the investment zone and the spend around the investment zone. Much projects are going to be are already defined, and they will be very much focused around a recovery programme post-COVID, but they will be very much dictated in the discussions with government. The ability to actually change or input new projects at this stage is very limited. We have to now look at prioritising the projects that we have to be able to meet the 90 million, at the same time look at other various funding streams that could perhaps meet the bigger ask of the 238 million, perhaps more collaboratively even with our neighbours in Stirling and Clacks around the regional economic plans. But our key priorities, particularly around economic regeneration, climate change and channel shift, will be very much focused around the investment zone spend, but the ability to change much at this stage is very limited. Councillor Alexander, do you want to add anything to that? And if Robin's able to give any more?
Yeah, just to say that, yeah, £90 million sounds a lot of money. It is a lot of money to an extent. When you consider what
Sorry, Councillor Alexander, you're breaking up. Okay, Robin, are you able to?
Yeah, thank you, convener. If I can just come back on the specific question that Councillor Bissett had, which was the relationship between the investment zone funding and the TIF allocation. There is obviously a relationship between the two, but certainly the investment zone money won't compromise the investment zone funding, if that answers Councillor Bissett's specific question.
Okay, Robert, we're having some technical difficulties this morning with hearing people, and it's unfortunate that we seem to have managed to lose the chief executive, which is quite careless of us, really.
Okay, Councillor, I wasn't sure if you got any of what I responded there then.
We got your indication that there shouldn't be any significant impact on the TIF as a result of the investment zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fine.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I'll be brief. As Mr. Smale says, most of the things are noting, and I'd like to thank Mr. Smale for painting it's not a great picture for us going forward as a council, and thinking differently will need to be the right direction that we take forward. I'd like to thank him for being frank, because it'd be easy for him to say everything's rose in the garden when it's no. And a lot of hard decisions will be made or be taken going forward. And that's not even taking into consideration in these unprecedented times when we don't know if there's a second wave coming. and that might harm us even more. So it is very trying times, and as numerous people have said at this meeting and previous meetings, that we'll need to be thinking differently and out the box sometimes, and hopefully as a council we can manage through these hard times. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Convener. I think September's meeting is going to be a very important meeting, probably one of the most important the Council will ever have. And it brings me to talk about the recovery plan, which will be coming forward, and how it relates to the Housing Capital Programme, which we were discussing just now. Housing, of course, isn't just housing, it includes commercial and shop properties. And I wondered if some thought was being given to not revising the capital programme completely, but diverting some of that capital monies to encouraging small businesses in those council-owned properties. Second point, just a brief one, I noticed home working is having an effect, particularly in relation to accessing equipment. And I wondered when those that need to do that will be back at work, and also those who patrol externally, visiting people or visiting estates will be back at work as well. Because if that's having an effect, it's not just on the capital programme, but on the condition of some of our estates. And perhaps going off target a little bit, you don't have to answer that latter part. It's just a thought. So the first question was, can the more housing capital monies be used on commercial properties in reference to the recovery plan?
Okay, Kenny, are you able to answer those? Yeah.
Thank you, Convener. I'll try my best. Within the housing capital programme, it's not that we're not saying that the programme itself will not be completed as per our asset management regime. So we are still going to do the projects, it's just going to be a bit longer. But you're correct, one of the things we have a small proportion of commercial outlets within the HRA umbrella. And it's certainly something that we're willing to look at. And subsequently, I have a meeting with Dr. Stuff next week with regards to the Grangemouth, the commercial properties within Grangemouth. But certainly as a full asset, we look at all the assets under the HRA, and if it's something we can support and take forward, then certainly we'd look at that, Councillor.
The second question, which may not be entirely relevant, but it's about home working. It seemed to be affecting the capital programme, but it's also affecting other areas. I take it the plan in September will foresee a return to work as far as that's safe and possible.
Kenny?
Oh, apologies, I didn't know that was about the HR. Yes, sorry. Officers are now starting to get back into their patches. It's very much a stepping stone. They are out there now. Their correct risk assessments have been put in place in discussions with trade unions. So certainly our housing officers are back out there. What we are though prioritising now is, and local members will be aware, is signing up of our housing properties at the present time. So they're focusing on people who are waiting to get into properties. That helps us deal with the great issue that we've got with our homelessness as well. So they're prioritising that, and they're also prioritising where we can provide support where there is financial difficulties, and making sure that the correct support is provided there. But you will see officers back out in their patches and trying to make sure that we can move things forward. And that's certainly something that my colleagues within housing property, but also housing officers, are dealing with our colleagues in development services, looking to see how we can furnish additional details to move on some of the larger development programmes.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Coombs?
Obviously, it is a very full report giving us these updates, and I think the implication for the council's programmes are huge. And Brian spoke about the council's priorities, and I think that they don't just need to be looked at. I think we need to have a total overhaul of what our priorities were pre-COVID. I think that if we don't use this as a learning experience, then we're really missing a curve. I think we need to start again. And as I said yesterday at the meeting, we agreed in February to have a zero-based budget. And I think that come September, we need a lot of information, and we need to look at it with fresh eyes and not just assume that we'll carry on the trajectory that we were on before with the projects and the plans that we had. We need a clear process. And as I said, I think we do absolutely need to start again. I was glad to hear yourself, convener, highlighting the importance of local authorities and local involvement in the decision making. I think councillors need to have a meaningful involvement and not just have key decisions thrust upon us at the last minute, as sometimes seems to happen. I'm just looking to see if I've got any questions here. It's like, obviously, a lot of the questions that I had, Brian has covered in his very full, but not too long, Brian, account of the report. Obviously, somebody's been nipping your ear. So I do appreciate that a lot has happened and that we will have to accept the changes that have been made. But I think that reading between the lines, we're being alerted here to some big decisions that are going to have to be made down the line, and it's not too far down the line. September's only, what, 6 weeks away. And I do think from what you were saying earlier, that although this is just for noting, is there any way that we can say that as a council we are concerned about the serious situation that we're in and what options are there open to us, or is that a conversation for September?
I think, Councillor Coombs, between now and September, collectively, so our various political groups will be getting briefings on how we might take all this forward, and we will be looking at having to do a revision to our budget in September. My understanding, there's to be some budget workshops arranged over the next week, a couple of weeks. Excuse me, we don't have Mr. Ritchie and Kenneth having technical difficulties, but that's my understanding, Brian, that there is to be further work done, and there's to be some information come forward around the zero-based budgeting, and looking at particularly around education services as perhaps a starting point to look at that. Brian, are you able to give any further information around that?
Convene to reinforce and reconfirm what you've just said. There is member budget workshops being, I think in fact they're for Tuesday, so they're quite imminent, and that will give members an update overview of the position for the current year, cast an eye forward to next year, and will expand on how we're proposing, which is an outstanding remit, you'll recall, to CMT to set out how we think ZBB could most productively and effectively be taken forward. So the member workshop will be an opportunity both to relay our current position and also get members' feedback. And I think a bit like the report today, all under the same theme of preparing, if you like, for and building up to that very big meeting in September, where members will have a lot to digest, but on the upside, we'll give a holistic on a number of key frames: corporate plan, business plan, priorities, digital strategy, latest finance update, both capital and revenue. So they'll all be on the table to inform decision making.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Does that help?
Well, in as much as the information is useful, but not particularly warm and cuddly. Can I just make one final point? The consultation that is out at the moment basically is asking people for their views on the recovery, and everything, as always, is predicated on the bottom line and the money that's concerned. I've done the consultation, and I would be very interested to know what exactly what information we're going to get from that. The questions are so vague that they're almost meaningless, and I would really love somebody to get back to me and tell me what it is that we were expected to get from the community engagement there, because it's beyond me. I mean, you know, how important is our housing and homelessness? Who's going to say it's not important? You know what I mean? It's like, that is just a huge big raft of, it's kind of like, you know, are you going to stop beating your wife questions?
Joan, what I'll do is I'll perhaps ask Mr. Ritchie to get in touch to speak about the consultation for you. And that might be able to explain the thought process and the reasoning behind the questions and the way they've been put.
I'd appreciate that, because I say people that are contacting me are saying what a waste of time. So I'd be happy to hear the flip side of that story.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have the Chief Executive on the phone. Kenneth, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Convener. My apologies for suddenly disappearing. I have no access to Office 365 now, so I'm just calling in.
Okay, we're glad that you're still with us. Is there anything in relation to the report that you would want to make comment on at this time, Kenneth? There was questions around the investment zone and the use of the funding, and also around the budget revision process and the consultation along with the vision and priorities.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And unfortunately, I mean, I missed the last 5 or 6 minutes of the discussion. So last heard Brian just finalising his response to some of the questions. I suppose 2 things, and these may have been covered already, but in terms of the investment zone, clearly the 90 million is a significant sum. I think the comment was made that this was broadly in line with what other councils had received, and of course that's correct. It's less than we'd asked for or hoped for. So clearly there's a piece of work being done now where we prioritise the projects that we want to take forward, and I guess particularly those that can have an early impact in terms of economic recovery to support that, and also looking at other funding mechanisms in terms of supporting that work. The point about it being in the report, of course, is that some of these projects are going to require match funding as we take them forward, and therefore there's likely to be an impact. There will be an impact on the capital programme. I think the specific question asked was in relation to the impact on the TIF, and I'm certainly not aware that there'll be any impact in relation to that. The TIF is a separate funding stream, and of course that is something we are still taking forward. Just in relation to consultation, clearly we've got a couple of workshops with elected members coming up, and when we have the second of these, we'll have all the feedback from communities that we've had and through the online consultation. My understanding is we've had over 900 responses so far. I think it's important that we push to try and get more, and I would encourage elected members to, if they're speaking to people in their communities, to suggest that it would be helpful to input. I've had some quite positive feedback in that people have been asked to give really quite basic comments about what's important for them now in terms of COVID-19. And in relation to setting future priorities, that will be important information, and it won't give us an absolutely clear sense of direction, but I think it will give us a sense of what is important to people and where their priorities lie. So no such consultation exercise is perfect by any means, but the fact that 900 people have responded, hopefully there will be more. There have been some focus group sessions. There's one going on at the moment with equalities groups, and my understanding of that is that people have welcomed the opportunity to comment and feedback. So imperfect, certainly, but it will give us something of a steer as we take quite fundamental decisions about what our priorities are going to be, in the constrained financial situation that we face.
Thank you, Kenneth. Is there any other questions from members? Are we happy to agree the report?
Agree.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Moving on to our final item, and that is the update from Children's Services on the reopening plans for the schools and early years establishments. I appreciate there's going to be probably a lot of questions, and I know that Robert is probably schooled out now after having so many discussions, and particularly this week with all the agencies to the other bodies, etc. But if you can take us through the report and highlight what you think that members may be most have need of knowing, and indeed anything else that is of significance. Robert.
Thank you, Convener. As members will recall, we discussed the process of schools returning on both the 25th of June briefly, and then again on the 7th of July. On the 7th of July, there was a little bit more known about changes in the Scottish Government's plans. It was then anticipated over the course of the school holiday period that there was going to be an announcement definitively on the 30th of July, and that new guidance would be published on that date. That happened last Thursday on the 30th, and it became clear that the Scottish Government wanted schools to recommence on the 11th of August, and that the children should be fully back in school no later than the 18th. In terms of the significant changes to the guidance, if you have a look at the bullets in paragraph 3.1, the guidance has changed in that social distancing is no longer required between children in primary and secondary settings. Also removed is something that we discussed previously, which was the concept of bubbles of no more than 8 children in early year settings. That restriction has also been removed. The school transport is now deemed to be an extension of the school estate, so there is no requirement for children to physically distance when travelling on school transport, but it will be necessary for drivers to wear the appropriate PPE, which will in most cases be face coverings, as is the case in other public transport. As we previously had reported, we had on the 7th of July proposals for what was referred to as a soft start that would have taken place over the first 2 weeks of term. It's now the case that that soft start will take place on the first week and not the second week. So that's set out in more detail in the report in paragraph 4.1. So what will happen is that our schools will return on Monday, in-service days on Monday and Tuesday, with the first pupils returning on Wednesday. Then different pupils will be there on the Thursday and different pupils will be there on the Friday, but all children over the course of that first week will have been in school before they return fully on Monday the 17th. In terms of school transport, we've been working closely with the Transport Planning Unit in terms of school buses and also additional support needs transport. We published yesterday information for parents on the way that transport would operate, what the rules are, what the expectations are of children in terms of hand hygiene. The bus contractors know that they need to provide hand sanitizer on access and egress points of the buses, and there's also some detail around the arrangements that will be in place for children travelling in taxis. Those travelling in taxis are being communicated with directly because the arrangements for different children vary. In terms of the new guidance, there's a requirement for us to enhance the cleaning regime. So we have recruited additional cleaners and we will now have a 5-day-a-week full school clean regime, but we will also have a cleaning regime in place during the course of the day. And again, we will be publishing, it may already be up this morning, we'll be publishing details of the enhanced clean, and we're also signing off that cleaning regime with trade unions in short order. In terms of school meals, initially, what we intend to do is provide, as we have over the summer, a grab bag option at the beginning of the term. That is because the guidance still precludes bringing different groups of children together in large areas. So it wouldn't be appropriate to have different classes going to a dining hall at the same time. But what we hope is that as we move towards September, either the Scottish Government will further relax the rules, or we will be able to start introducing hot options as soon as we possibly can once the schools are back. Early learning and childcare, as of Wednesday, all the children who have currently been attending early year settings will be back, and as previously discussed, all those establishments that are capable of delivering 1140 will do so from next Wednesday. All others will deliver 736.25, as I recall, again from next Wednesday. New children, in line with our normal procedures, start 2 weeks later. So the new children will begin on Monday, the 24th of August. And all early years parents have been notified of those arrangements. Paragraph 4.3 sets out, as I've already mentioned, the soft start that we intend for Wednesday, 12th, 13th and 14th of August. And the important thing to note is that all children will be back in school as of Monday, the 17th. In terms of finance and resources, I think it's important to recognise that there is and will continue to be additional cost pressures in terms of the impact of COVID. COSLA is currently undertaking an exercise to establish what those costs are, and they are in gathering information from councils so that we can get an overall view of what those costs are, and it would be my intention to bring a report to a future meeting of the Emergency Executive detailing in much more detail what the costs have been. But in short order, there'll be additional costs associated with the recruitment of additional teachers, additional support for learning assistants, and also, as mentioned earlier in this report, we're also recruiting additional cleaning staff. There's been expenditure on personal protective equipment, and will continue to be a need to spend money there. So, as I say, what we will do for a later committee is bring in much more detail both the expenditure to date and the expected impact of the need for ongoing increased expenditure until we return fully to normal. In terms of the overall position, I think it would be fair to say that this has been quite a challenging journey for everyone involved, not least in recent weeks where our schools are still on holiday, our staff are still on holiday, and they come back on Monday. But as members will know, head teachers and other colleagues have been in schools in order to prepare for the new term. I don't doubt that next week will be a challenging week, not just for our staff, but there will also be, I believe, considerable uncertainty and concern among many parents in terms of what children will face having been off for 3 or 4 months. But just for members' information, myself and my colleague David Mackay and Councillor McHugh met with over 100 parents on Monday evening and did our best to answer the questions that they had on the arrangements that would be in place and the conditions that would apply when children returned. And I believe that meeting was very well received. I'll stop at that point because I'm sure members may well have a number of questions that they want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And just before I go to you, I think I just want to acknowledge how hugely complex and challenging it has been for the service across the board in getting our schools back into operation, and just the dedication of many of the teachers, but also the other ancillary staff, the administrators and the janitors, catering, etc. The goodwill that has been shown by them has been absolutely tremendous, and to acknowledge the patience of our parents, and they have had this quest for information to know as soon as possible to be able to manage their lives, and it's been very challenging for them, but to acknowledge their patience and thank them for doing that. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it has been a very, very difficult time, and there's been a lot of thought and a lot of planning put in by Robert and his team, and we appreciate that. And there's been a lot of change and a lot of wait for further guidance, and then more planning and more change, and there has been a lot of twists and turns. And I want to acknowledge that it has been a very frustrating time and continues to be a frustrating time for all parents. But the important thing was that to give false information or to give information that led to something that wasn't going to happen was very important, and that's why, you know, there's been a lot of outcry about a possible lack of communication. But we would rather wait and put out good information than put out information that we then had to retract, which has happened as we go through this journey. Obviously, we have had to wait nationally to see how this pandemic has affected our country and how our country has responded to it. I think we're very fortunate in some respects that our country hasn't been hit as bad as others, and we have responded in a responsible way. But as we can see already in areas of our country, due to lockdown restrictions being lifted, that there has been an upsurge, and that is something that we have to be very, very careful of going forward. And we are nervous about our children coming back to school, and rightly so. Parents are concerned, and that's why it's very important for parents to know what is happening in their child's school. And hopefully by this time, every single school should have their individual plan put in place and parents should have been informed. So hopefully confidence has risen within our parents and we're preparing and welcoming coming back to school. I was on Twitter this morning with quite a few schools that have been putting out stuff, and the teachers are just jumping at the bit to get children, because that's what they do. That's their work. That's their passion, to get our children back into school. And I'm really hoping that our kids are looking forward to getting in there, but bearing in mind, you know, that we have to stay safe and go by the rules, and that's imperative. I'd like to thank Robert and his team. Yeah, he did really well the other night to engage with well over 100 parents. At one point, I thought I saw 300 and odd down in the bottom corner, but that was maybe something that I was reading wrong. A lot of our parents have had similar questions that answered to the best that Robert and David and the rest of the team could do. Also want to acknowledge Margaret, the chair of the parent councils for Falkirk, for organising that meeting and allowing our parents to have some kind of platform to air their concerns and their views. So totally appreciate that. Going forward, obviously we'll be keeping an eye, as Robert has reiterated, and in the past to parents. We will be watching if there's any, you know, infection in schools know how to deal with that. You know, we'll be keeping a close eye on the plans, and plans will change. Some for maybe not so good, some for the better as we go forward. But it's very important that we do take these plans, and I'm just so pleased that we've got to this stage. Looking forward to moving to the next stage, but also very aware that we need to keep up with our safety aspects, as well as our kids enjoying getting back to learning. I'd like to move this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. And I think it's very much a positive that we are getting the kids back and getting them back into full-time education early next week. Okay, I'll open it up now for members, which I'm sure that there'll be questions or comments.
No, moving on. Thanks, Convener.
Okay. You're not all usually that shy. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I was just checking to make sure I was off mute there. First of all, can I just say I'm slightly disappointed in hearing that there was a public meeting with parents, between 100 and 300 parents, and other political groups in the council weren't invited to that, because I certainly wasn't aware of a public meeting. That's just my first point. It was only on the 7th of July that we agreed the soft approach for the return to school, and that was a 2-week lead-in period. Now, I fully appreciate that the Scottish Government have issued updated guidance, but that is merely guidance. We don't have to follow that. It was a unanimous decision at the previous executive meeting that we would have a 2-week lead-in period, and that is something I would personally stick by. I think parents are expecting it. And we went on there was comments made about making changes in communications to the parents. The communication hasn't worked. That is why there's been such a high number of complaints. Now, as far as the Labour Party and Falkirk's concerned, we're listening to these complaints and we're trying our best to deal with them and handle them. But there has been a lack of communication, and it's not good enough. Things are changing far too quickly for parents. We need to make a decision and stick to it. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Robert, do you want to respond to that, particularly around the soft start, and there wasn't much option for us, and that government had made that decision and we had to basically amend accordingly? But I think it's a positive, and it's getting the children back.
So Councillor Nimmo was right. The emergency executive on the 7th did agree a 2-week soft start. but the decision by the Scottish Government that was taken and communicated on the 30th effectively means that we have an instruction to open the schools by the 11th and to have all the children back no later than the 18th. That then means, in my understanding of the situation, that is not an option, and we need to proceed as I have outlined in the report in front of members today. I'll maybe just ask my colleague, Mr. Moody, just to comment on what I've just said.
Colin?
Sorry, I was just having some difficulty unmuting. Mr. Naylor is correct in what he says. All through the process of the coronavirus crisis, the government has had enhanced powers in relation to education, and the guidance which has been issued to education authorities has been underpinned by a series of directions, and those essentially require local authorities to implement the principal parts of the guidance which have been issued by the Scottish Government. It's an aspect of the emergency coronavirus legislation that the governments across the United Kingdom have power to issue directions of this kind, and the Scottish Government has done so.
And just on the second point, Councillor Nimmo raised in terms of communication, and as has been acknowledged already by the committee, this has been a fast-changing situation, and as Councillor McHugh said, the careful balance that we have sought to strike over the course of the summer is to have the latest and best information on the website at all times, and to be as clear and concise as we possibly can in what it is that we tell parents. So this latest guidance was published last Thursday, the 30th. By the close of play on last Thursday, we had a new post on the website setting out the arrangements for the reopening of schools and the days on which different groups would be attending. That link was communicated directly to all parents and carers, and as I said earlier, we have continued in the following days to be putting up more information as we have the details. So, for example, yesterday we published information on the arrangements for transport and for meals, in terms of what the options will be when children return to school. Later on today, there'll be a revised version of what was up before the summer, which was a frequently asked questions section for parents to refer to. So I think by the close of today, or if not very early tomorrow morning, everything that we would intend to be sharing will be published and on the website. In addition to that, individual schools have been contacting their parents, sometimes individually, depending on the nature of the children that are attending. Communication is always a challenge, and I think in terms of the school communication to parents over the course of the most recent weeks, I think it's important to acknowledge that all school staff have been on holiday for the last 6 weeks, and I'm certainly very grateful for the goodwill shown by staff across the council to be effectively progressing the reopening plans as energetically as they have been, so that we can get this right for our children and young people starting next week.
Convener, can I maybe just follow up on that? Robert, do we have a figure for the number of complaints that we've actually received in total regarding the return to school? And can I get an answer to my first question, which related to the public meeting with parents?
I was invited to attend a meeting by the chair of the Falkirk National Parent Forum, which I agreed to attend. So I'm afraid I can't comment on who was invited to attend that. I think in my role, parents wanted to ask questions of me about the arrangements for the return to school. So I can ask in future if those that organise such meetings would wish to invite a wider political audience. But my short answer is it wasn't my meeting.
Okay.
In terms of numbers of complaints, we have had, and we log them all, a number of inquiries from elected members, from members of the public relating to a whole variety of matters over the course of the last 4-month period. So we've had, for example, at the point where we set up the childcare hubs, lots of contacts and queries. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't had very many complaints around the whole issue of the reopening of schools. Parents have been kept abreast of the latest and best information, as I've said. Going back to the very start of the meeting, I don't doubt this week that there'll be a number of certainly inquiries, perhaps complaints to schools in terms of SQA results. But I will certainly do my best to see if we can get any kind of number of what might be deemed to be a complaint around the issue of reopening schools.
Thanks for that, Robert.
Okay, I've got a number of hands up. I've got Councillor Coombs and Councillor Kerr and Councillor Alexander. Councillor Coombs.
Where am I?
You're there?
Can you hear me? It's still showing as I'm muted on my side, right? Okay, thanks very much. I mean, we discussed communication in June, at the beginning of June. I think we were front page news on the 11th of June, if I remember rightly, because parents didn't know what was happening about 11:40 hours. Now, I thoroughly appreciate that staff, our officers, have gone above and beyond. And the difficulty here is, of course, that we've got thousands of anxious parents, but we were chucked out of the driving seat when Scottish Government required us to do something different to what we, as elected representatives, had unanimously agreed. At that point, it was always going to be difficult. You can't give information if you're not in charge of making those decisions. And as I say, I appreciate that. However, the thousands of parents that are out there are looking to us, and when they're asking me questions that even I don't know the answer to, and I'm not talking about the hundreds of people that have spoken to me about specific situations regarding their child's medical needs or their dietary requirements or their travel requirements. I'm talking about the hundreds that just had no clue and were very, very concerned. Some of them, it wasn't just their concerns. It's like there's an awful lot of anxious pupils going back from, obviously, my own experience. It's Larbert High School that they're talking about. One email was what parents had received. Now, that was up until yesterday. I haven't checked this morning. We're a week before the schools start, and I don't see that as anywhere near sufficient communication. Can somebody ask me, why didn't we have schools with contact names? I appreciate that teachers were on holiday, but couldn't there have been a member of staff from Sealock House allocated to each school so that if parents did either email in or phone in for information, albeit if that information wasn't available, they would have at least had somebody to say, we can't tell you that at the moment, but we will tell you next week. A holding pot, at least some form of comfort for parents to know that they were at least being listened to. Because I think it's not just a lack of communication, it's that void that has caused a lot more anxiousness. Even, I don't know, a video of somebody online rather than just, we can't tell you because we don't know, blanket the whole thing. Is there a reason why we couldn't have done a contact list?
Okay, Mr. Naylor?
I don't recognise what it is that you are raising. We have communicated directly with our parents about the arrangements for return. So they know, and they have known since before the summer, when it was that we were intending to resume schools. Because we knew about the date of the 11th quite some time ago. So parents have known that. The detail of the arrangements for what's going to happen next week, as I say, was communicated as quickly as possible on Thursday. And that it was done centrally from Sealock House because we have a mechanism of being able to distribute a text message to all the parents that have provided us with their contact information, and to the best of my knowledge, that's all of them. In terms of further communication and or incoming, anybody who contacts Sealock House is provided with the latest and the best information that we have available to us. So what's being suggested is that there's a communication gap, and I'm not clear what it is that people want to know that they don't yet know, because we've certainly done our best to make sure that we've informed people as widely as we possibly can. Now, in terms of, for example, a parent that has a request about dietary requirements or about particular medical needs and so on and so forth, all of that is and always has been dealt with at school level. And those communications, I would anticipate, particularly around things like additional support needs, transport, dietary requirements, particularly for new starts and so on, that will be high on the list of the activity of schools next Monday and Tuesday on the in-service days. I honestly don't want to be sounding apologetic here. Because I think my staff and the school staff have done a very good job in terms of keeping people involved and informed.
Okay. Thanks for that, Robert. I appreciate that. And I don't doubt, as I said earlier, that you've been doing your best and giving out the latest and best information to parents. But you said that pupils knew before summer what the plans were. Well, before summer, the plans were completely different, because we said we were going to do 2 weeks off start. So I don't see how you can say they knew what was going to happen. They knew what was happening at that time with the information that we gave them. We were then told, they followed Scottish Government direction where we were required to change the decisions that we've made. And that's the point I'm making. And because of that, you weren't in a place where you could give clear direction as to what it was that we were doing. And I think we need to admit that this hasn't been a positive experience for anyone. I mean, I feel the pain of the officers and of the administration, because without doubt, this is an embarrassing situation where a council unanimous decision has been overturned by the Scottish Government. And I think that we should have the decency to say that that's what happened. Now, I think that some of the direction that's coming from Scottish Government is also very concerning. I personally have had a lot of people say to me, for older children, during their lunch hour, if they go to the shops, they have to wear a mask. But when they're sitting in a classroom with 29 other pupils, they don't. It's like, I find it difficult and confusing to follow the reasoning behind that. I also think that there's a lot of other issues. I think that the government flip-flopping hasn't helped at all. And I think that they need to decide either they trust local authorities to do their job or they take control. It's like, because this mishmash here means that no one's going to them to ask why or what's going on. They're coming to us, and I'm not hearing what you're saying, that these parents, it was like at the weekend I was getting a lot of comments and questions from residents. I then put on a Facebook post to say that, you know, if you've got any questions, email me. If ever I had wished I hadn't, I had over 100 people contact me yesterday, and they certainly aren't aware fully of what's going on. And we're talking only a week away. We're talking about parents who can't say whether or not they can turn up to their work next week because they don't know when their children are starting. I think that lessons need to be learned. I think you get order, you get counter order, and then you end up with disorder. It's, I just think it's been, as I say, a very bad situation, not of our making. But on that, I think I would like to propose an addendum, sorry. I've sent it to Jack earlier, and I think that it was important because of the safety aspect. I mean, it's, as I said, parents are concerned, and rightly so, from nursery to the kids just starting at primary ones to the ones going into a community of 2,000 at Larbert High. They all need to be, they need to know that their safety as well as their education is our main concern. And I think that's why the 2-week soft start, as you proposed, was the best thing for the pupils' health and well-being, to give teachers time to allay any fears and any anxieties that they've had over the last 4 months. But yet, no, we've got 2 days and that's it. You'll do as you're told, sir. Anyway, so the addendum, I don't know, does Jack share it, Colin, or what's the story here? Do you want me to read it out?
He's just in the process of doing that, as you can see.
Okay. For the sake of the tape, the emergency executive seeks a report from officers setting out monitoring arrangements and contingency measures further to those previously agreed to be presented at the next executive. Safety and recovery are the main priorities, and the director must ensure all schools follow the prescribed guidance without deviation and local interpretations. And what I mean about contingency measures is my understanding of the contingency measures that we had previously agreed were relating to if we did not have 100% of our pupils returning at the beginning of the school session. So the contingency measures I'm talking about is if there were to be breakouts, as we are aware, it's a distinct possibility that there may well be pupils who come in showing fevers, or teachers or whatever. What are the plans once the session has started, once the term's in place, rather than our contingency measures which were prior to the start of school?
Convener, I'll second the addendum.
Robert, I know that that there has been various iterations produced around that, and to deal with isolated incidents within schools as well. Are you able to comment on the addendum before we move into, because I know there's a lot of others that also want to come in and speak.
If I could take the adherence to the guidance first, what we have required of all schools, and indeed the guidance stipulates, is that every school will complete a risk assessment based on the revised guidance. Schools will submit their individual risk assessments, assuring myself and colleagues that they are following the guidance and the rules. That will be submitted to us on Monday. We have a meeting arranged with all of the trade unions on Monday afternoon, and collectively that's the arrangement that we will go through with the trade union colleagues to sign off that these risk assessments are satisfactory, follow the guidance, and that they are in place. School staff will be cited on these risk assessments, and we are preparing standard presentations that will be shared during the course of the first 2 days in service, making sure that we have a consistent message for all school staff about the rules, the regulations, what is expected of them, what they can and can't do, what they have to do in terms of social distancing, what they have to do in terms of hygiene, and so on and so forth. Similarly, we're preparing presentations that are age specific for children, so that they are clear about the circumstances and the arrangements pertaining in the school. Again, in terms of why are we asking you to wash your hands so often? Why have we got a one-way system? Why have we to stay together when we go out to playtime, and so on and so forth? Well, those presentations will also inform the children of the arrangements for things like school meals and so on and so forth. In terms of what will happen in the event of a localised outbreak, we will be advised by public health in terms of any requirement to close an educational setting. The arrangements that are currently in place, and again included within the guidance, are arrangements that we would follow should staff or children develop or display symptoms during the course of a day. So arrangements are in place in every school for there to be an area where any person who becomes unwell to be isolated, and for, in the case of a child, for their parent to come and collect them. Clear guidance as to what that parent would be told in terms of contacting the relevant health places for advice. Were there to be a significant number of cases, we would be informed by public health of any actions that we were required to take. And there's also within the guidance new arrangements that are being rolled out, as you'll know, in terms of track and trace. So our schools would be advised again by public health of what was to happen to a member of staff if they went home and they were then to self-isolate. It would be the job of the track and trace system to then be making contacts with the people that had been in contact with that individual. In terms of the comment that was made about the requirement for children, senior pupils that perhaps go out to the shops at lunchtime, it is the case that if they were going to be going into a shop, they would need to put on a mask, and it is not the case that they will be required to wear a mask or a face covering when they're at school. What we have intimated is that should staff or indeed pupils wish to wear a face covering, that will be at their discretion, but it's certainly not required by the guidance that's issued by the Scottish Government, unless in cases where there is close physical contact. For example, we will have staff, some of the staff that are working with some of the children at Carron Grange School will be wearing personal protective equipment. Others won't, but this is dealt with on a case by case basis, as it is and will be in terms of our ASN transport. So, for example, all of our escorts that travel with children in taxis will have a face covering. and in some cases, they might have more than a face covering, and there'll also be a requirement for all taxi drivers to have face coverings, and indeed so too will bus drivers. So all of these arrangements are in place. I can give you the assurance that I've given you just now, but in terms of the consistency of all of the schools doing exactly the same thing, broadly speaking, they will stick to the parameters that have been given to them. That's why they will be completing a standard risk assessment exercise. But it would not be right for me to say that it will be the same in every single school, because schools are different, their spaces are different, their access and egress arrangements are different. But things that will be common are, for example, there will be hand sanitizer in every learning space. There will be a requirement for both children and staff to hand sanitize on entering and leaving the building on all occasions. So when children go out at playtime, before they come back in, they'll need to sanitize their hands, and so on and so forth. So all these things will be common across all of the schools, because that's the new rules, and it's part of my central team's job to check that that is the case. We will also, the officers that are based centrally, we will have a rota in the first weeks where we will be going into schools to observe that all of these arrangements are in place and are being maintained. And I also have an agreement with the trade unions that was made earlier this week that we will reconvene on Friday the 14th at 4 o'clock, and we will collectively review their best information regarding the situation on the ground and any concerns that have been raised with them, so that we can together work through any required changes. And we will also meet with them at the end of the first full week back, where we should have a much better understanding of anything further that needs to change in terms of our emphasis. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Robert,
I think
thank you
Sorry.
for that. And just before we briefly move on, I think that I'm minded to accept the addendum, just highlighting though that there would be an updated report coming anyway, because this report was very much written last minute following the issue of the guidance, and there was still a lot of work to be put together over the weekend and to put all of these contingency plans in place. And I think it's right that you review where things are after that first initial getting everybody back into school. So I'm happy that we accept the addendum, and that there's a further updated report comes to the next executive, giving members an update of how things have gone and what changes may have had to be implemented as a result of the practicalities of having children actually in schools. Could I just also say that the information that was given to parents and the previous report was always contingent on things changing. There's always that caveat that things may change. And again, within the next 2 weeks, things may change, and we may have to be able to react to that. So while information is being given just now, it's being given in the best, in the interest of what we know and the best information available, but things may continually change as this virus continues to change. I hope that we continue to suppress, and that things move in a very positive way forward to getting back into what will be our new normal, because I think there's going to be aspects of all of this that will be retained for in perpetuity perhaps, and that could well be the hand washing, the sanitising, etc. But there's other things that may well get back into what we consider more normal. But we just need to be mindful that the things will change, and we need to be able to react to it. And I think that having the constant criticism of having to change, knowing that isn't helpful, and that can breed discontent, particularly within parents. when we've made it quite clear. Okay, is there any, I've got a list of, you wanted to kind of put you in first, and then I've got James Kerr and then Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I just wanted to add some of my comments, convener. I totally totally do not accept Councillor Coombs' idea or personal opinion or group opinion that the Scottish Government has flip-flopped. I think the Scottish Government has proven that they have taken measured decisions throughout this whole pandemic. We do not want to underestimate and undermine the fact that we are in a pandemic that we've never been in before. Obviously, decisions were getting made and then changed as we are going through this, and still are very much going through it. As we've seen in Aberdeen, there could be changes yet again, and at very rapid decisions getting made. So I think it's very unfair of you, Councillor Coombs, to put forward these opinions. And I think also that our children's services and our staff are working extremely hard to take what information they are given the measure that the Scottish Government are taking and putting that in place. And they have responded very well as far as making plans and then changing plans. I think the fact that we communicate at Scottish Government level every day with the public in Scotland to let people know and update them, it's very difficult to say that the communication has not been out there for people to see and hear all over social media and Twitter and on national broadcast. I think it concerns that people within education work very hard, and it is always the negative that's teased out and caused confusion, and I think that's unfair. Obviously, there would be a further report coming. These plans are put in place, and we're going to have to work through them. It is alien to a lot of families and children moving into the school environment after being off for so long. Best plans have been put in place by the best people, and we will have to move with that and change when necessary to keep, as I said in my opening statement, to keep everyone as safe as possible. Yes, seniors will not have to wear face masks within school, but obviously if they're out and about moving around in the public domain, they will have to cover up. To track and trace within schools will be easier than when you're out and about moving in and out of shops. So to take protection when you're in and out shops and moving around in the public is a definite, whereas within the schools, then obviously we know where these children are and who they've been mixing with. So I think a lot of the fears that are being pushed into the public domain are unfair. That's really all I want to say at this time. Thanks.
19-1, convener. Cecil, you're on mute.
Councillor Coombs, I'm aware you've spoken and at length, and I've been very lenient.
I just want to answer. Adana has mentioned me and criticised me, saying that I was criticising the staff and being negative. At no point, in fact, in the contrary, I said on many occasions that the staff, the officers have gone above and beyond, and I appreciate the difficult situation that they're in. And it wasn't an opinion when I said that the Scottish Government overturned our unanimous decision. That's a statement of fact. And my job is to support and speak up for the people of Falkirk, not to support and speak up in behalf of the Scottish Government. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. There was, Robert's answered a few questions I had regarding the Conservative group were concerned that the costs weren't for the startup wasn't included in the draft plan, but Robert's already stated that that'll come the next meeting. Can we be assured that all the parents because this was discussed yesterday at the group leaders meeting, that all the parents who obviously schools don't have their emails, so they received letters. Are we confident that every parent has received those letters now? If not, how do we get the communication to them? That's my first point. The second point is, would it be possible for Mr. Naylor or his team to give us over the next 2 or 3 weeks, probably until the next executive, a weekly members briefing like what we were getting? Because that was it was handy to get that during the summer, and if that could be continued, it help us with briefings if we get emails, correspondence with different parents. Thank you, Convener. And just before it, like everybody else, I appreciate, and our group appreciates the hard work that everybody's put in to get this. It's been a difficult situation. It's been a changing situation. And there is people who are supposed to be on holiday who have worked through that. And our group appreciate the hard work that Robert and his team have done to get us to the stage that we're at the moment. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Just to clarify, Robert, it was in relation to the early years where we had to communicate about the parents with letters that was referred to there.
So the Councillor Kerr's right. The early years communication was done by post. Excuse me. My recollection is that was the week before last, either on the Thursday or the Friday, that those letters went out. So anybody that's not received that letter, I can only assume it's a problem with the post. But anybody who has not heard and has any query, they can phone Sealock House, they can phone the early years team, and they will have those numbers from earlier previous communications with them throughout the whole process of registering for a place in an early years setting. We still have people working within business support at Sealock House, and we answer any and all queries as they come in from parents on a daily basis. So as I mentioned earlier, I am not recognising the concept of people not knowing what's happening. I would remind members that I sent all members an update last Thursday. Contained within that update was a link to the latest and best information that is on the website. So if you have any queries from constituents that are suggesting to you that they don't know what is happening, I would suggest that you invite them to email CS Communications or apologies, director@childrenservices.falkirk.gov.uk. So we will answer any queries from any parent that believes that there is information that they don't have that they need to get. In terms of the resurrection of the bulletins that I was preparing in the early stages of COVID, perfectly happy to do that, Councillor Kerr. The extent to which things might change day to day, I certainly hope will not be as frequent as was the case then, when I think I was telling you something different almost on a daily basis. But happy to, when there is something to communicate, to reinstate that from the beginning of next week. And the final comment I would make, and maybe this is to the convener, I think at one point you mentioned the next meeting of the emergency executive. I would like to suggest it would be the one after that I would report back on an update on where we are. If it's to be for the next one on the 20th, I would need to submit the report next week, which is the second day of school. So I wouldn't be able to tell members very much more than I'm telling them just now, though more than happy to attend on the 20th to give a verbal update and to be asked to answer questions about how things are on the ground.
Yeah, if I may come back in, convener, just one. I was only asking about, you highlighted it about the letters for the 1140 hours for the new starters. I wasn't mentioning nothing about people not knowing for the others, the other years.
Apologies, Councillor Kerr.
I have got an irate grandson who's having to go back Friday next week, when his wee sister's just starting school and she's only going one day, and he doesn't think it's fair that he's having to go 2 days and she's only getting one. So, but I've had to explain that's just part of what we're going through the news on.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Kerr. Robert, I think members would appreciate, even if it was just a verbal update on the executive at the 20th, so that it is as close to when the schools have returned as possible. But a full report coming to the following one, I'd be happy to do that, just understanding the pressures of time and relating to that. So I hope that members are content with that. At least we'll get further information following the first 2 weeks of the schools being back. In respect of that, Councillor Coombs, your addendum mentions the next executive. Would you be happy to be the following executive verbal report?
Yeah, happy for a verbal for the next one and then have a full report as Robert explained.
Okay, Councillor Alexander, you've waited patiently to come in.
Yeah, but you know me, was that I'm absolutely astonished how little knowledge the two Labour representatives that have spoken this morning have actually demonstrated that they have. You know, and maybe it's because we heard that complaint that 100 and odd parents had got together in a public meeting and no one had been invited from the Labour Party. Well, perhaps it's because people recognise that the Labour Party are becoming irrelevant in most of these issues. We still don't know what their policies are. We don't know nationally or locally what they would have done that's different. We do know that they will cherry pick, and we do know that they will come here with a delaying motion. That's all we seem to get from the Labour Party these days: delaying motions. We don't have enough information, don't have enough knowledge, don't have enough gumption in most cases. So you know where we are is the most fast changing circumstances that we've ever seen in 100 years. And what does the Labour Party want us to determine a position and stick to it. In other words, ignore any future advice that's coming our way from the experts. Now, that seems to me to be a bizarre position to adopt, but one that I'm afraid that we're becoming used to. In terms of the report, I'd like to sincerely congratulate for the work that they've done, and you know they've done so because they've done in a way that is presentable, and they've done it in a way that has gone out to parents, and that's something that should be recognised. If people haven't received the emails, if people haven't received the letters, well, I doubt we're looking at a hard fall. The fact is, convener, that we have an excellent response from the director, with an excellent response from the government, and they will only have to look at the minutes of the meetings from COSLA to see that there's with all of the parties and all of the elected representatives throughout the country, and
Councillor Alexander, I'm not very sure if you can hear, but you've broken up. Can't hear you.
Just as well.
There's no need for that, Councillor Nimmo.
No, that's appalling behaviour.
Councillor Bissett, you wanted to come in?
The Councillor Alexander's comments about the Labour Party there. I think that we have worked closely at every executive to try and get us to this stage, and we've all contributed. But we have a duty as elected members to raise questions for the folk that we represent, who have serious concerns about their kids going back to school. This virus is a deadly virus, so I think it's prudent of us to ask questions and challenge. Certainly, I don't think there's any level of criticism levelled at Director of Education and his team, who I think have done a fantastic job to this stage. Very difficult given the change in circumstances, having to adapt and overcome to get to this stage where the kids are ready to go back to school. I think just on the Scottish Government, I think that to have a disparate plan locally might have helped, where we could have said the schools will go back in 2 weeks' time, or whenever we felt locally that it was prudent, rather than being instructed that the schools will go back on this date. I think that's the point we're trying to convey, where all councils are slightly different, and you could have had a tweak here and a tweak there to get to where you want without having to kind of rush it. There are a lot of concerns, and people are nervous, obviously, at the kids going back to school. And I think what Robert's done is created a good plan to get the kids back to school. I think that the concerns with parents will be allayed once the kids go back to school and they see the process that the kids go through during the day. And once we've got a week under their belt, they'll feel a bit better about it, I'm sure. I think what they would want to know is that they have the full guidance on basically what's a typical day for a kid, what will happen in the event of an outbreak, all these kind of things. As a parent myself, it would be great to have a piece of paper in front of me just to say, here's what will happen in the event of this, a typical day at the school. You enter the school, here's what happens during the day, here's what happens when you leave. So it's a very difficult, trying situation for everybody, and it's testing everybody's nerves. And I'm just glad the kids are going back. They've lost about 6 months education, and it'll be good to see them going back. Though you can't please everybody. I'm sure some great president said that at some point. So I think that as a council, we're trying to work together, but we are allowed to criticise or make political points if need be. But I thought we were trying to get past at certain points. But needless to say, politics does arise and comes into it as well. So I think that I was glad also to hear Robert talking about additional support needs in the escorts and that process, how that would happen, taxi drivers, buses and stuff like that. So the only question I wanted to ask was about the cleaning staff as well. Will that take us back to the complement where we were before we had to make the cuts? And will these staff maybe perhaps become permanent? But I'd just like to again say that thank everybody for the effort. Thank all the councillors involved here for the effort they've put in and the thoughts they've put into this to try and get us to the stage where the kids go back to school. And everybody will have their slightly different views, and but I'm just glad we are at this stage. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Robert, are you able to say in relation to the cleaning staff?
Yeah, so the cleaning staff that we've recruited will become part of our permanent establishment. If at some future point the position changed where we were significantly post-COVID and there was a possibility to review or revise cleaning arrangements at some point in the future, then that would obviously be a possibility. My opinion, however, is that I can't see there being a requirement for less cleaning anytime soon. So the regime that we will be putting in place from Monday, in my view, would run at least for the academic session, and it would take, I think, different advice from health and public health professionals before I would be suggesting that council revised or changed the regime we're about to put in place.
Thank you, Robert. I've got two more people wishing to speak. I've got Councillor Harris and Councillor Gardner. At that point, as there's no dissent on this, I feel that we've given a significant amount of time. I'm going to bring this debate to a close at that point. So Councillor Harris first, and then Councillor Gardner.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to ask Robert on the ELC. Our 13 private provider nurseries, have they all survived in the period since the lockdown?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, they've survived. We are meeting with them through the course of this week. Rather than say something that's not wholly accurate, Councillor Harris, I'll take that off table and I'll get back to you on the status of all of our partners and their reopening plans.
Thanks, Robert, that would be helpful. And in terms of their individual risk assessments, I presume that those have been signed off. Obviously, the schools have done their risk assessment, so that and you've got access to that. But just wondering whether our private partners have done, or presume they have done, risk assessment, and who's signing those off.
They will be required, as per any and all establishments, to follow the Scottish Government guidance on the arrangements that they need to have in place for the return of pupils. But my understanding would be that the risk assessment is their responsibility, and they will need to be able to, if asked, for example, by the care inspectorate, to demonstrate that their steps and measures are appropriate and are in place. Again, on that question, if I've got anything further, once I consult with colleagues, I'll get back to you, Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Robert. And just to echo what's been said about the hard work that's been done by the department in very difficult times, I think you've done a jolly good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. There was unwarranted criticism there, I think, of the department, of Robert and department. And I know from obviously personal experience and what we've been dealing with, and I think the administration has worked extremely hard during these times. I know Adana and Cecil have been pushed to the limit at times. I do know other councillors have worked very hard as well. But I do believe our officers, the officers and Robert's team in particular, has worked extremely hard to get to where we are, and criticising them at this stage is not what we should be doing at all. I also think to pick a point that that Councillor Bissett said, the kids haven't been without education for 6 months. The teachers have been working extremely hard here with the learning packages being put through in the virtual learning. So I think that's pretty unfair as well, Robert. And the pupils have taken to that. Some of them take to it better than others, but they have taken to it, and we need to appreciate that as well. But I think there's been a lot of people saying here about Robert's team and the congratulations as well. I think moving on to Stuart's team and what's been doing in the background by them, putting things in place for all the extra staffing in place coming in is something that we can't miss as well. So I'd like to thank his team as well. But I think from Kenneth down to everybody here, Kenny, Robin, everybody's worked extremely hard through these times. So we need to support them and not be overly critical where it's not wanted, in my opinion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. I think, as I say, we've given a good opportunity to members to speak on this. There will be a verbal update at the next meeting, and Robert's agreed to give a brief update to members following as the kids get back into school and to what that feels like. So I'm going to bring this to a close as there's the addendum was accepted, and there'll be a further written report, not on the 20th, but the following executive, and members will be able to interrogate that further at that time. So all that remains is to thank everybody for their attendance this morning. I appreciate that people have different opinions. We just need to be mindful about keeping that less of a personal attack in that, and just keep the politics where it should be. But thank you very much for your attendance this morning.